The year's 2017. The Cleveland Browns had just spent the first overall pick on generational Texas A&M pass rusher Myles Garrett, banking on him to become the franchise cornerstone they'd been searching for. Chicago stunned the football world at number 2, trading up just one spot to take Mitch Trubisky, a quarterback with only 13 college starts. The move was met with raised eyebrows, especially with Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes still on the board. Watson, the proven winner from Clemson, went 12th to Houston, while Kansas City aggressively jumped to grab Mahomes at number 10, a raw project gunslinger compared to Jay Cutler, who many figured would sit for a year or even longer. Christian McCaffrey, taken 8th by Carolina, was the ultimate Swiss Army knife who could be the future of the running back position. And at number 4, the Jaguars grabbed LSU sledgehammer Leonard Fournette, hoping he would bring an old-school toughness to a franchise lacking identity. Those rookies, along with names like TJ Watt, George Kittle, Cooper Kupp, and Alvin Kamara, would go on to define the season and the next decade. But no matter what happened at the draft, all eyes turned to New England once summer hit. The Patriots were coming off the most famous comeback in NFL history, and the preseason narrative was that this might be the best team Bill Belichick ever had. Tom Brady was 40 but still playing at an MVP level. Rob Gronkowski was back and healthy. The Patriots had added deep threat Brandon Cooks, signed Stephon Gilmore to pair with Malcolm Butler, and seemed to have patched every hole. Vegas made them heavy Super Bowl favorites, and some even debated whether New England could actually go 19-0. They opened at home against the Kansas City Chiefs, who apparently didn't get the memo regarding how unbeatable New England was supposed to be. Rookie running back Kareem Hunt, who fumbled on his very first carry, rebounded with one of the greatest debuts ever, nearly 250 total yards and 3 touchdowns. Alex Smith suddenly looked like Joe Montana, carving up the Patriots for 368 yards and 4 scores, and the Chiefs routed the Patriots 42-27, silencing the crowd and making those Super Bowl odds look questionable at best. But Aaron Rodgers reminded everyone why he was considered the league's most talented quarterback. Green Bay started 3-1, with Rodgers orchestrating clutch drives to get the Packers out of the gates hot. In Week 3 against the Bengals, he threw a last-minute game-tying strike to Jordy Nelson, then set them up to win in overtime on a field goal with another dart. At the end of September, he looked like the MVP favorite. The Falcons, meanwhile, were desperate to prove 28-3 hadn't broken them. Just half a year after blowing the most infamous lead in Super Bowl history, Atlanta opened their sparkling new stadium on a mission. They started 3-0, including a convincing Sunday Night Football win over Green Bay where their defense harassed Rodgers. The meltdown still loomed in the background, but the Falcons looked like they were on a revenge tour. And on the West Coast, the Raiders had as much preseason hype as anyone. Derek Carr had just become the league's highest paid player. Amari Cooper was expected to ascend into the elite tier, and Marshawn Lynch came out of retirement to run behind one of the league's best offensive lines. And for 2 weeks, the hype was justified. Oakland started 2-0, but then reality hit. A loss to Washington in prime time exposed their toothless defense, and the Raiders closed the month on a 2-game skid. In Pittsburgh, the Killer Bees of Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, and Le'Veon Bell were the league's most unstoppable trio. Brown was as dominant as ever, but Bell looked a bit sluggish after skipping training camp in a contract dispute. Still, Pittsburgh finished the month 3-1, despite not yet being the well-oiled machine fans expected. But the Vikings had major quarterback issues. Sam Bradford, fresh off a magnificent Week 1 performance, went down with a knee injury, and suddenly journeyman Case Keenum was under center. Nobody expected much from him, but he kept the Vikings afloat, managing games and leaning on a defense loaded with playmakers like Harrison Smith and Everson Griffin. By the end of September, Minnesota was 2-2, but nobody knew yet that Keenum would become the face of one of the league's most improbable runs. Meanwhile, the New York Giants were imploding. A playoff team just the year before, they opened 0-4 and looked hopeless. Odell Beckham Jr. was battling injuries, and Eli Manning was washed up. Head coach Ben McAdoo had no answers and began to lose the locker room. And unfortunately, the Colts had a better shot at the number 1 pick than they did at a playoff spot, as Andrew Luck was missing the entire season with a shoulder injury. But no one was worse than Cleveland. They started 0-4, the beginning of what would be a historic season for all the wrong reasons under Hugh Jackson. And overshadowing all of it was the anthem controversy. In late September, President Trump's comments criticizing NFL players reignited tensions around protests during the national anthem, even calling for them to be released. Football season's finally here, and I've teamed up with DraftKings Sportsbook to bring you an incredible offer. Right now, customers can sign up using my promo code BEACHKID, bet just $5, and instantly get $200 in bonus bets. Put just $5 down, and you've got $200 to play with right away. Personally, I'm all about player props, but whether we want to cook up a same-game parlay or chase the action with live betting, DraftKings has us covered. So don't miss your shot to get in on the action now that the season is upon us. Sign up now, bet $5, and score $200 in bonus bets instantly using my promo code BEACHKID. October's most exciting story took place in Houston. After flashing in September, Deshaun Watson exploded in October. He threw 5 touchdowns against Kansas City, then walked into Seattle and went blow for blow with Russell Wilson in one of the greatest rookie performances in NFL history. Watson threw for over 400 yards and 4 scores, fearlessly attacking the Legion of Boom, while Wilson countered with late-game heroics to steal the win. But Watson looked like a no-doubt future MVP and face of the league. While Philadelphia was also rising, Carson Wentz had the Eagles looking like the best team in football by the end of October. He threw 3 touchdowns and a statement win over Carolina on Thursday Night Football, then 4 touchdowns as he ripped apart Washington in primetime the very next week. By Halloween, the Eagles were 7-1, riding a 6-game winning streak, and Wentz was the MVP frontrunner. But Philly wasn't the only NFC surprise. After years of mediocrity, the Rams had come alive under 31-year-old head coach Sean McVay. Jared Goff looked like a real quarterback thanks to a real head coach, Todd Gurley was back to his dominant 2015 form, and the Rams were scoring points at a rate the franchise had not seen since the greatest show on turf. By the end of October, they sat at second place in the NFC West, a huge improvement for a team that had gone 4-12 with the league's lowest scoring offense in 2016. The NFC South, meanwhile, was pandemonium. The Falcons, who had started hot in September, shrunk in October, losing 3 straight, including a Super Bowl rematch against the Patriots where they didn't score until the 4th quarter. The Saints went the other direction, however, catching fire and going on what would eventually be an 8-game win streak, fueled by Drew Brees' efficiency, a resurgent defense, and the breakout of rookies Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara, who both looked like they were born to play in Sean Payton's offense. And in Carolina, Cam Newton was as unpredictable as ever, alternating between good and bad games. But the defense kept the Panthers squarely in the playoff hunt. In the AFC, the Chiefs started 5-0, with Kareem Hunt running wild, but October exposed their flaws, and Kansas City dropped 2 straight to fall back to the pack. Further west, the Chargers were the best bad team in football. They opened the season 0-4, with 3 losses coming by a single score, but in October they turned things around. Phillip Rivers and a defense powered by Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram brought them back to respectability, even if they were still just 3-5. But the Cowboys, 1 year removed from a magical 13-3 season, quickly discovered how much harder year 2 can be. Ezekiel Elliott's suspension saga became the story of the fall, a legal tug-of-war that dragged on week after week. Even when he played, the shadow of the looming suspension hung over Dallas like a dark cloud. In October, the Cowboys dropped 2 straight, including a shootout with Aaron Rodgers. By the end of the month, Dallas was 4-3, still alive but headed for a mediocre season. However, the biggest pieces of news in October were Odell Beckham suffering a season-ending ankle injury, and Vikings linebacker Aaron Barr breaking Aaron Rodgers' collarbone. Whether backup QB Brett Hundley could tread water for long enough for Rodgers to return with a shot at the playoffs was a major question. November began with a cruel twist of fate for Houston, as Deshaun Watson tore his ACL in practice, cutting short what might have been the greatest rookie season ever. But by the time Thanksgiving hit, Carson Wentz and the Eagles were obliterating opponents. In Week 9, they hammered the Broncos 51-23, with Wentz tossing 4 touchdowns and making Denver's defense look helpless. Against Dallas in Week 11, Wentz started slow, but a second-half avalanche buried the Cowboys 37-9 in Jerry World. After that, they beat Chicago 31-3 to reach a 10-1 record, riding a 9-game win streak, and Wentz was the runaway MVP favorite. Philadelphia wasn't just the NFC's top seed, they were the scariest team in all of football. But the Vikings weren't far behind. Case Keenum was playing more like a franchise quarterback than a backup. In November, he shredded Washington for 4 touchdowns and kept Minnesota rolling with wins over the Rams and Lions. With Adam Thielen breaking out as an all-pro receiver, Stephon Diggs as his partner in crime, and the league's top defense, The Vikings ripped off 7 straight wins to this point and finished the month 9-2. A Super Bowl in their home stadium no longer seemed like a fantasy. And in New Orleans, the Saints running back duo of Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara became about as formidable a backfield duo as the league had seen. And in Week 11, they staged one of the greatest comebacks of the year, storming back from 15 down against Washington to win in overtime. This looked like the most balanced team Drew Brees had ever played on. In Los Angeles, Sean McVay's Rams were proving they weren't just a cute story. They were legit contenders. Jared Goff continued to grow in confidence, Todd Gurley was in the thick of the MVP race, and Aaron Donald was wrecking pockets every Sunday on his way to Defensive Player of the Year. They lost a mid-November showdown to the Vikings, but bounced back with a big win over the Saints. At 8-3, the Rams were the new kings of the NFC West. Seattle, though, was not going quietly. Russell Wilson turned November into his own personal MVP campaign, accounting for nearly all of the Seahawks' offense while his team around him fell apart. Richard Sherman tore his Achilles, Cam Chancellor was sidelined with a neck injury, and the Legion of Boom was effectively no more. But Wilson kept them alive, dragging Seattle to a 7-4 record by the end of the month. The AFC, meanwhile, was coalescing into a 2-team race. The Patriots had shaken off their Week 1 stumble and by November looked as ruthless as ever. Brady threw 4 touchdowns against Miami in Week 12, and they ended the month 9-2, riding a 7-game win streak. And right behind them were the Steelers. After a merely decent start to the year, they caught fire in November, with Big Ben finding his rhythm and Le'Veon and AB playing like the league's 2 most dangerous weapons. Brown's 3-touchdown demolition of Tennessee on Thursday night and his game-winning catch against Green Bay were reminders that no receiver in the NFL was better. Pittsburgh finished November 9-2 as well, putting them on a collision course with New England in December. But not every AFC team was on the rise. The Chiefs, who had started 5-0, regressed. They lost 5 of 6 from mid-October to the end of November, including an embarrassing defeat to the lowly Giants. And Kansas City looked like a shell of the team that had shocked New England on opening night. The Jaguars, on the other hand, were one of the stories of the season. Powered by their suffocating defense and rookie Leonard Fournette, Jacksonville ended November tied for the AFC South lead at 7-4 with Tennessee. They weren't pretty, Blake Bortles was still Blake Bortles, but nobody wanted to see the Sacksonville defense in January. Elsewhere, the Bills provided comic relief. At 5-4, they benched Tyrod Taylor for rookie Nathan Peterman, and the result was 5 interceptions in one half against the Chargers, one of the ugliest quarterback performances in NFL history. Sean McDermott had no choice but to turn back to Taylor, and Buffalo finished the month 6-5, still in the playoff picture. And the Giants, already a disaster, benched Eli Manning in favor of Geno Smith, an unpopular move that would soon prove consequential for Ben McAdoo. During the December stretch run, Carson Wentz and the Eagles walked into the Coliseum in Week 14 for a showdown with the Rams, a possible NFC Championship preview. Wentz threw 4 touchdowns, pushing his season total to a league-high 33, but on a scramble toward the goal line, he tore his ACL, ending the season of the MVP favorite and face of the league's hottest team. Nick Foles took over, and while Philly finished 13-3 with the NFC's top seed, nobody outside of Philadelphia believed they could actually finish the job. While Minnesota rode Case Keenum's improbable hot streak to the conference's 2nd seed, they ripped off wins over the Falcons, Bengals, and Packers, also finishing 13-3. The Saints and Panthers also made their push. New Orleans leaned on Kamara and Ingram to finish 11-5, sweeping Carolina in the regular season and reclaiming the NFC South. The Panthers also reached 11 wins, however, and the Falcons got over their October lull to finish 10-6, ensuring 3 teams from the NFC South made the playoffs. The Rams clinched the NFC West with a 42-7 demolition of the Seahawks in Week 15, and Todd Gurley went nuclear in December, scoring 8 touchdowns in the final 3 games and running away with Offensive Player of the Year. In the AFC in Week 15, the Patriots and Steelers met in Pittsburgh in what was a potential AFC title game. The victory gave the Patriots the inside track to the number 1 seed, a path they would not relinquish. The Steelers, though, still finished strong at 13-3, with Antonio Brown logging over 1,500 yards despite missing the final 2 games, and Le'Veon Bell adding nearly 2,000 yards from scrimmage. Behind them, Jacksonville held off Tennessee and clinched the AFC South with a 10-6 record, their first playoff berth in a decade. And the Chiefs, after their midseason rough stretch, went 4-1 in December to finish 10-6, with Kareem Hunt winning the rushing title and Tyreek Hill establishing himself as one of the top receivers in the game. And the Bills, even after the Nathan Peterman fiasco, clawed their way to 9-7 and secured a wild card with their Week 17 win over the Dolphins. But the Chargers, despite going 9-3 over their final 12 games, fell just short. They would have been a difficult matchup for anyone, but that 0-4 start was just too much to overcome. The Ravens, meanwhile, had their playoff dreams crushed in the cruelest fashion. At 9-6 entering Week 17, they only needed to beat the Bengals at home. But Andy Dalton's fourth down touchdown to Tyler Boyd stunned Baltimore and allowed the Bills into the postseason for the first time since 1999. As for the league's disappointments, the Browns went a historic 0-16, the Giants fired Ben McAdoo after his Eli Manning benching, and the Raiders limped to 6-10, with Derek Carr playing injured and Amari Cooper unable to catch a cold, costing Jack Del Rio his job as rumors swirled about John Gruden's return. And in Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers' brief December return ultimately was not enough to save a lost season, while the Lions also hung around all year but missed the playoffs at 9-7 despite 1,000-yard seasons from both Marvin Jones and Golden Tate. By the time December ended, the field was set. The Eagles were wounded but still the NFC's top seed. The Vikings, Saints, Panthers, and Rams all believed they had a shot, and in the AFC, the Patriots and Steelers looked destined for another clash, while the Jaguars and Chiefs lurked as threatening wildcards. Wildcard weekend kicked things off with a whimper in Jacksonville. The Jaguars hosted the Bills in Buffalo's first playoff game this century. The game itself was expectedly ugly. Blake Bortles threw for just 87 yards, unable to complete even the easiest of passes, but he scrambled for 88 on the ground, doing just enough to win 10-3. The Jags advanced while Buffalo's season ended with Tyrod Taylor concussed and Nathan Peterman poetically throwing the final interception of their season to Jalen Ramsey. In Kansas City, the Chiefs hosted the Titans. Alex Smith and Kareem Hunt stormed out to a 21-3 halftime lead, but in the second half, Derrick Henry took over. The second-year back pounded Kansas City for 156 yards, and Marcus Mariota authored one of the strangest plays in NFL history, throwing a touchdown pass to himself after his throw was batted back into his hands. The Titans stunned the Chiefs 22-21, completing yet another January collapse for Kansas City and spelling the end of Alex Smith's run as their starter. In the NFC, Atlanta walked into Los Angeles and bullied the Rams. Julio Jones scored, and the Falcons' defense shut down Todd Gurley and Jared Goff. The Rams had been the darlings of the regular season, but their playoff inexperience showed in a 26-13 defeat. The other wildcard game was more competitive. The Saints took down the Panthers 31-26, as Drew Brees threw for 376 yards, hitting Michael Thomas and Ted Ginn for big plays. Carolina fought to the end, but Cam Newton's last drive stalled, and the Saints advanced to set up a divisional match with Minnesota, which was when these playoffs truly turned unforgettable. In Foxborough, the Titans' run met reality as the Patriots beat them 35-14, with Brady throwing 3 touchdowns. And the Steelers had spent the weeks prior dreaming of getting revenge against New England in the AFC Championship. But with that distraction, they overlooked Jacksonville. The Jags marched into Heinz Field and dropped 45 points on one of the league's best defenses. Leonard Fournette ran for 3 touchdowns, including a leaping score to set the tone early. Blake Bortles, mocked all season, played mistake-free football. Ben Roethlisberger threw for 469 yards and 5 touchdowns, but it wasn't enough as the Steelers fell 45-42 in a shootout nobody expected. The Jags, of all teams, were headed to the AFC title game. In the NFC, the Falcons traveled to Philadelphia. Most assumed Philly's season had effectively ended when Carson Wentz tore his ACL in December, and this was by no means a pretty game for Philadelphia. But late in the fourth quarter, with Philly leading 15-10, Matt Ryan took the Falcons down to the red zone. The Eagles survived, sending their underdog story into the NFC Championship. And then came the game of the year. The Saints and Vikings staged an instant classic in the divisional round. Minnesota led 17-0 at halftime, but Brees rallied the Saints, throwing 3 second-half touchdowns to take the lead. And with time running out, the Saints were up 24-23, one play away from the NFC Championship. Then, on 3rd and 10 from his own 39, Keenum lofted a sideline throw to Stephon Diggs. Saints safety Marcus Williams whiffed on the tackle, Diggs spun upright and sprinted 30 more yards untouched into the end zone as time expired. The Vikings had pulled off one of the most improbable finishes in NFL history, now known as the Minneapolis Miracle, advancing them to the NFC Championship in Philly. And Championship Sunday brought 2 very different games. For 3 quarters in Foxborough, Jacksonville looked like the better team, The Jags led the Pats 20-10 in the fourth quarter and should have clinched the game on a Miles Jack forced fumble and recovery that he could have ran in for a touchdown, but he was wrongfully ruled down. Instead, Tom Brady did what Tom Brady does. Playing with stitches in his throwing hand, he engineered 2 fourth-quarter touchdown drives, hitting Danny Amendola twice, including a toe-tap masterpiece in the back of the end zone. New England survived 24-20, denying Jacksonville the upset of the year. In Philadelphia, the NFC title game was going to be an easy win in the eyes of many Vikings fans. But after spotting Minnesota an early 7-0 lead, the Eagles went off for 38 unanswered points. Foles was sensational, throwing for 352 yards and 3 touchdowns, including a bomb to Alshon Jeffrey that set the Link on fire. Philadelphia crushed Minnesota 38-7, punching their ticket to the Super Bowl for the first time in 13 years. The 2017 season built to one of the most unlikely matchups imaginable. The defending champion New England Patriots, led by MVP Tom Brady, the dynasty that had ruled the league for nearly 2 decades, against the Philadelphia Eagles, led not by the would-be MVP Carson Wentz, but by his backup Nick Foles. The Patriots were chasing their 6th Lombardi trophy, and the Eagles were chasing their 1st. From the opening kickoff, Foles came out fearless, hitting Alshon Jeffrey for another long touchdown in the first quarter, and Doug Peterson dialed up ballsy plays, refusing to be intimidated by Belichick. The Eagles racked up yards and points at will, but Brady was playing arguably the best game of his career, keeping New England within striking distance every step of the way. The Patriots' offense was clicking, but the defining moment was created by Philly just before halftime. Facing 4th and goal, Doug Peterson called the play that would live in Philadelphia lore forever. Foles slid out to the right and caught a pass from tight end Trey Burton uncovered in the end zone. A backup quarterback catching a touchdown in the Super Bowl against the greatest dynasty in NFL history. The Philly special not only one-upped the Patriots' failed trick play from earlier in the game, but it was also the moment you knew the Eagles were not just happy to have made it there. And in the second half, defense became non-existent. Gronkowski hauled in a touchdown that gave the Pats a late fourth quarter lead, but Foles answered, facilitating a go-ahead drive capped off by a touchdown to Zach Ertz. Still, Brady had the ball with over 2 minutes left, down 38-33, so everyone in the world expected yet another Patriots comeback. Instead, Brandon Graham broke through and stripped Brady, and Philadelphia had the break they so desperately needed. A late field goal extended the lead to 8, and when Brady's Hail Mary fell incomplete as time expired, the impossible became reality. Nick Foles, after nearly retiring just a year earlier, was named Super Bowl MVP, outdueling Brady in one of the all-time great shootouts, throwing for 373 yards and 3 touchdowns. The underdog mask came off, and Philadelphia celebrated the greatest night in its football history. A triumph decades in the making. Foles became a Philadelphia legend, and Doug Peterson's aggressive play calling earned him recognition as one of the league's best coaches. But the immediate aftermath was less kind to Philly. Carson Wentz never regained his 2017 form. The following seasons brought injuries, regression, and eventually a trade out of Philly. Peterson's tenure unraveled within 3 years, and the team was dismantled piece by piece. For the Patriots, the loss was devastating but not fatal. Tom Brady had thrown for 505 yards and 3 touchdowns, arguably the best Super Bowl performance ever. Belichick was second-guessed for benching cornerback Malcolm Butler, who had been a Super Bowl hero 3 years earlier. And yet, New England returned the very next year. So if you'd like to relive the rest of the 2010s, click here.